is our first hearing of Senate bills. We'll continue to meet every Tuesday over the next month to meet the deadline for policy committees to finish hearing Senate bills by May 6th. Two bills have been pulled from today's agenda, SB 123 by Senator Liu and SB 291 by Senator Vargas. The first order of business is to take up our committee rules. Is there a motion to adopt the rules as amended? We've accepted an amendment at the suggestion of the Senate Rules Committee that we preserve the legislative records of the committee. Madam Secretary, would you read the roll?
Hancock.
Aye.
Hancock, aye. Anderson. Calderon.
Simply keep the committee informed.
Harmon.
Aye.
Harmon, aye. Liu.
Aye.
Liu, aye. Price. Steinberg.
Later on, and you will have the chair.
Okay, we'll put that bill on call.
Witnesses in support.
And let me just say that this year the President Pro Tem of the Senate and I have decided to continue the policy set in 2007, which is the committee's ROCA policy. ROCA refers to the Receivership Overcrowding Crisis Aggravation, and essentially says that the committee will exercise the highest level of restraint in considering bills that would aggravate to any degree the prison overcrowding crisis. This seems to be particularly important this year in light of pending court decisions, including the U.S. Supreme Court decision that's coming up, and as we implement and evaluate the realignment policy adopted last year. So essentially, under ROCA, this committee will hold any bill that would aggravate the overcrowding crisis. The policy excludes misdemeanors and any measure that would not create a new felony or expand or extend the scope of an existing felony or felony penalty. So with that in mind, we'll proceed with our agenda. Senator Pavley is here. You have two bills, SB 61 and SB 179.
We support Senator Rubio's.
Welcome to the committee. I know you're fairly ambulatory, so hopefully we'll.
I'm vertical, though, this week.
I don't think any renewable developers to in any way diminish species protection.
We'll start with Senate Bill 61, if that's all right. And I want to apologize for my voice. I'll be relying a lot on my wonderful witnesses. And if for some reason I break out in a coughing fit, I'll leave the chambers.
Okay.
The hearing will carry on,
okay,
and I'll be back.
Okay.
The permit application
Members, one of the reasons I'm here on this particular bill, last year when I carried a bill that related to wiretapping and expanding it from traditional phones to electronic versions to modernize it, the Assembly Appropriations Committee suggested that we don't change the sunset on the existing law, that we allow it to expire. So I'm just back to, because this particular law will expire January 1st of 2012, to extend the sunset to 2015, which was part of last year's concept, but because of the custom and practice and the way Assembly Approps reviewed these bills, that was taken out. And so this is, in my mind, sort of a procedural kind of application. As I said before, this particular bill, just like last time, is sponsored by the LA District Attorney's Office, would extend the sunset from January 1st, 2012 to January 1st, 2015. It expands, this bill doesn't, but last year's bill expanded from telephone to electronic technologies, and it's geared to just the most serious and difficult crimes, such as murder, drug trafficking, and organized crime. It is used as an investigatory tool of last resort. There's strict criteria for when and under limited circumstances a wiretap application is approved. It goes through a long process. You have to not only show probable cause, you have to give proof that all conventional investigative techniques have been exhausted. Proof must be given that the case is so dangerous, traditional forms of investigation are too hazardous to be undertaken, then approved in advance by the presiding judge of the Superior Court or the Superior Court for a narrow list of crimes, and those are just the most severe crimes. This is not abused. In fact, there's felony potential given to people who mislead the judge in any way in requesting this wiretap. It's been used successfully in LA County, cracked down on the most serious organized kinds of crimes. I also wish to note that California's wiretap law is one of the most stringent in the country, with strict constitutional privacy guarantees. In addition, the law made it clear that any abuse of wiretapping technologies that violate civil liberties and privacy rules is punishable, as I said before, by a felony. Given the sophistication of many criminals operating today, California's wiretap program merits continuation. I respectfully ask for your aye vote, and I have with me today Jim Provenza with the LA District Attorney's Office and Joseph Esposito, Head Deputy LADA's Office of Major Narcotics Division. Witnesses.
Good morning, Jim Provenza, Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. We're pleased to sponsor the legislation, and with me is Joseph Esposito, Head Deputy of our Major Narcotics Unit, to answer any questions.
While we still think that the bill needs some work, we're interested in working with the author of this bill.
Marty Varenikar on behalf of the California District Attorneys Association. We are in support of this measure.
My chief witness here, Mr. Esposito, is here to answer any questions. Senator Hancock, a technical expert in how it's used in Los Angeles under very limited.
Thank you. We'll see if that's necessary, Senator Pradley. Are there any other speakers in support? Other speakers in opposition? Seeing and hearing none, are there questions or comments? The bill has been moved and seconded, even though we don't do that in the Senate.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, thank you anyway.
I'm going to vote for it.
But a nice thought. I want it recorded for the record that Senator Anderson is seconding.
Seconded the motion, that's right. So, Madam Secretary, if you would.
Wonderful relationship.
Okay. The action is due pass to appropriations. Hancock?
Aye.
Hancock, aye. Anderson?
Aye.
Anderson, aye. Calderon? Calderon, aye. Harmon? Harmon, aye. Liu? Liu, aye. Price? Steinberg?
The author reaching out to us, the staff was
5 to
reaching out to us. They do have some concerns about things that aren't attached to.
I will put the bill on call so members can add on. SB 179, Senator Pavley.
Yeah, thank you very much. This bill is also sponsored by the LA District Attorneys Association and is designed to ensure that sex offenders serve their full court-ordered parole time. During the last decade, sort of unintended consequences of ballot initiatives and other legislation has resulted in a number of conflicts in statute. This bill addresses one of these conflicts and closes a loophole sort of between Prop 83 and Senator Alquist's former bill. In that law, it ensures that sex offenders serve their full parole time after their release from state hospitals into society as intended, providing parole services that are greatly needed in the community as they transition from prison. Under current law, high-risk sex offenders who have completed their prison sentence must be evaluated by California's Sexually Violent Predator Program. This is under the Department of Mental Health. During this review, the offender remains in a state hospital until the proceedings are complete, and it is determined whether or not the offender is indeed fit for release into society. Due to an inconsistency in the law, the parole time starts immediately upon release from prison, but continues while the offender is still confined in the state hospital. Therein lies the problem. People can literally run out the clock of their parole sentence while staying in the state hospital, subject to delay, could be up to 3 to 5 years, having little or no parole time left after their release in the community, where they desperately need those parole services. SB 179 addresses the legal loophole by requiring that parole time will be suspended totally until the offender is released from the custody of the State Department of Mental Health. The bill clarifies that the purpose of parole, that is protection of the community, is not frustrated by having the parole period be served while the offender is in a secured, locked facility and not living among the general public. There is a cost factor in what this costs the state, as well as you have the parole as well as state mental health services. We know that sexually violent predators are among the most dangerous groups of offenders out in our community. This closes a loophole between Prop 83, Jessica's Law, and the intent of parole starting after your prison term and after your review through the Department of Mental Health. I respectfully ask for your aye vote. And with me today, Jim Prenza with the LA District Attorney's Office and Diane Lupacino, I probably mispronounced your name, from the LA District Attorney's Office.
Thank you. We have to ask for witnesses in support and witnesses against anyway. Thank you. I know you're here to help. I appreciate it.
But thank you again.
Good. That's good.
Jim Provenza, Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. We're pleased to sponsor this legislation, just moving the period of parole, not wasting the resources while the person's confined, but having that period occur after they leave custody. Still, whether they're adjudicated to be a sexually violent offender or not, these are individuals convicted of serious violent sex crimes that, of all people, are the ones that need to be supervised. Currently, if a person committed one of these crimes now, likely subject to a life sentence or life parole. So this is really just correcting a quirk in the law. This was originally contained in legislation by Senator Alquist, which was chaptered out, and this fixes that problem.
Yeah, it seems pretty straightforward, so if witnesses could.
Diane Labrusciano, Deputy District Attorney, Prosecutor in the Sexually Violent Predator Unit.
Marty Varadkar on behalf of the California District Attorneys Association. We're in support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there additional witnesses in support?
Good morning, Chair and members. Good morning, Chair and members. Danielle Higgs on behalf of the California State Sheriff's Association in support.
Philip Ong on behalf of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We serve 30,000 victims of sexual assault every year, and we also sit on the Sex Offender Management Board, and we're in strong support.
Thank you. Are there others in support? Are there witnesses in opposition?
That was set in statute last year. This is an additional to it? This no. Authorized the same way. We're expanding the current one.
Liberty Sanchez on behalf of the California Public Defenders Association in opposition to this measure. We believe that rather than closing a loophole, as the proponents of this measure suggest, the bill instead kind of upends the manner in which a determination is made regarding whether probable cause exists to retain someone. We believe that the way the bill is written, rather than under existing law where a finding of probable cause has to be made. Merely petitioning to show that there is probable cause would be sufficient. We believe that there are truly scarce resources, and those scarce resources should be targeted on the greatest risks to society, and that the existing system, which targets those scarce resources on truly sexually violent predators, is an appropriate way to continue this. That basically this would disenfranchise certain individuals who wouldn't be able to be necessarily represented by counsel to have their petition thoroughly heard under the confines of this bill. And so for those reasons, we are concerned about the bill and urge your no vote.
Senator, some would say they're going to a different.
Thank you. There are other witnesses in opposition. Seeing and hearing none, are there comments or questions from members of the committee? Senator Calderon.
Yes. So let me understand this. The prisoner is paroled. Before they go into the GP, they're evaluated at a mental hospital. How long does that process normally take?
There's an initial evaluation by the Department of Mental Health, and then a probable cause finding. Then that can be any length of time between the time of probable cause and the time of trial.
And where is the ex-prisoner residing at
the state hospital.
So they are in custody.
They're in custody. They never really leave custody. They go right from prison to the state mental hospital.
How is that bad? I mean, if they're serving, you're still serving. They're in custody, even though they're not on parole. They're still under supervision.
The problem is if the parole period runs during that time, then when they are released, they're released without any supervision, just directly into the community. If the parole period is moved to the place where they are let out, then there is some supervision in the community. So it's not right from the mental hospital to the community.
So let's say if their parole is, 3-year parole. Is it possible that they're in this mental facility for 3 years?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and
that's the problem.
It's often
and in 3 to 5 years.
Actually, we have some that are there for 14 years and they don't want the trial. So what ends up happening is, I would say 90 or more % of the time, the offenders haven't had their trial and their parole time has already run. So if they are found to no longer qualify, yes, if they are found to no longer qualify at some point, most of these offenders are going back out into the community without any supervision by parole.
And so during the time they're in the hospital, you're saying that's not safer for the community than being out in the general public on parole?
Senator, what we're saying is that there's actually a dual monitoring system that's happening, and that's the problem. Their parole time was given to them for their criminal case, which happened before the SVP proceedings even started. So what's happening is they're being monitored 24/7 in the hospital. So if they do something wrong there, then they will be punished for that. But on top of that, they're now being doubly monitored by parole. So it actually saves money.
Build their capacity and go out and poaching issues and others. Because you've got 2 houses. It's the
If there are no other comments or questions from the committee, there is a motion to adopt the bill. And Madam Secretary, would you read the roll?
The action on Senate Bill 179 is to pass as to appropriations.
To appropriations, yes.
Hancock?
Aye.
Hancock, aye. Anderson? Anderson, aye. Calderon? Calderon, aye. Harmon? Harmon, aye. Liu? Liu, aye. Price, Steinberg. 5-0.
Okay, that bill is on call.
He's in jail now.
Yeah. Right. So we are waiting for Senator Wright, who's in GO.
Yeah. He's on his way.
And he is on his way over.
You know, I'm going to head back up and relieve.
Okay. And we have a 10:15 special order of business.
Anticipating that certain possible reservations senators may have, we have built into this bill an accounting perspective where we will be able to track, measure, and monitor where funds are going and how well the department is performing, and it will produce a report for this body in 2013 to give us that information.
Are you kidding?
No.
No, you're not. I'm sorry, Mr. Rubio. You're a good friend, and I really like working with you on issues here. But I haven't seen an accountability for a report around here in a long time that really means anything in this place. And so I'm very, very skeptical about authorizing more positions. Has anybody talked about contracting out all the new positions, not just a few that may meet at a certain level here?
Sure, there are some who have brought it up, and there are others who say that perhaps it's not the best course to take. My commitment is to continue to work on that very issue as this bill moves through the legislature so that we can put the best piece of legislation and sound policy forward to get these projects moving. I think that's our main intent and priority in the bill, creating the jobs that are needed in the state.
Now, are these going to be sworn officers that are...
Senator Wright, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
This is item number 6, SB 296.
I apologize, as you probably will have done before. I'm chairing a committee even as we speak, and I've mastered the ability to be in two places at the same time.
Well, Senator Anderson was happy to go and relieve you, so watch out. You better make it fast.
Let me. This bill is one we introduced the same subject matter last year, and it passed this committee. We were not as successful in the Assembly Public Safety Committee. What we have done in this measure, Madam Chair, is to really scale it back. So in the last year, what we started doing is looking at best practices from around the state to see what other people had done. The City of Los Angeles has come up with a program that we've adopted in here, as well as the County of Ventura. The idea and the problem had been, Madam Chair, is that we have a process where we do gang injunctions, where we declare that someone who may or may not have committed a crime is enjoined from doing certain activities. That's done in civil court, Madam Chair, where the person is not entitled to a public defender, and most of the time they don't have one. In some instances, Madam Chair, we found that there's a whole list of John Does, and then the people kind of apply them to the list almost ad hominem as they see people walking down the street. Much of what they're enjoined from doing are things that would otherwise be legal. So a gang injunction might say that I can't walk down Central Avenue with a cell phone. It might say that I can't be on Crenshaw with blue tennis shoes. It might say that I can't be in a car with more than 3 people. We've even had some people in the Nickerson Gardens where every time they came home, they were in violation of the injunction because both of the brothers might have been on the injunction list, so literally when they came home, they could have been arrested for being in violation of the order. This bill does not remove that. What it does is it simply puts forth, as is done in Ventura County, as is done now in the City of Los Angeles, a process where the beginning of getting off the list exists. And when we started this last year, and it's still the case, Madam Chair, Los Angeles in over 30 years had only taken 2 or 3 people off of the list. So you had 45 and 50 and 60-year-old men whose names were still on injunction lists because the process or a mechanism for getting off didn't exist. So again, we adopted language here in 296 from what we found as were the best practices in both the City of Los Angeles and Ventura County. And I thank you for the opportunity to present.
Madam Chair, members, Liberty Sanchez on behalf of the California Public Defenders Association. The gang injunction laws are a classic example of a situation where it's very easy to get on the gang injunction list and extremely difficult to get off. This bill does not guarantee that people will be removed from the list. It merely provides a mechanism to better enable them to attempt to do so. There are thousands of people in this state that are on the list, many of whom have no reason for being on and currently have no easy mechanism or affordable mechanism for getting off. This bill would assist those individuals, and for those reasons, we're in strong support.
Are there witnesses in support?
Linton Borden from the California Conference and NAACP in support.
Thank you. Others in support? Are there witnesses in opposition?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Marty Varanakar on behalf of the California District Attorneys Association. We regret to tell you that we are opposed to this measure. In my prior employment as a prosecutor for the City of Los Angeles, I was responsible for many of the current injunctions, gang injunctions that are in place in Los Angeles. And the removal procedure that the good senator talks about was an internal administrative procedure that was developed to try to get individuals off the injunction if they complied with certain conditions. This bill basically does a one-size-fits-all for the state. We know that injunctions generally are an action based in equity, and they have to be specifically tailored to the local conditions and the possibility of deciding which orders are going to be applied because of the nature of the gang, the nature of the territory, and other matters. They're very fact-specific, and so they already, as the senator mentioned, many of these injunctions have removal procedures built in, but only, and they vary in their specific requirements because that's what the evidence supported and that's what the judge agreed with. Individuals can already challenge their inclusion right at the front end of the injunction, and many more individuals have attempted to take that tack. This legislation, again, would mandate a single statewide petition for removal. And I believe it would require that existing injunctions be modified in order to comply with the new notice and removal provisions that are set forth in this measure. Lastly, I think that the checkbox procedure that these forms envision, which any prosecutor who has worked with gang members would be obliged to thoroughly investigate each and every item that was checked, whether or not they had tattoos, whether or not they had been crime-free for the last number of years. And there are no limitations currently on how many times an individual may petition the court, leading to additional evidentiary hearings in each case, requiring more court time for judges and prosecutors to handle these petitions. Lastly, I believe that it impinges upon the judicial discretion that is inherent in action seeking equitable relief. Thank you.
Others in opposition? Seeing and hearing none, are there comments or questions from the committee? Senator Price.
Yeah, Madam Chair. First of all, certainly appreciate your efforts in this in this area. I know you've been at it for the last several years. It certainly is a great concern in my district, the area that I represent. Sometimes communities overreact in trying to identify the gang problem, and frequently, entire areas are stigmatized. I live in Baldwin Hills, not far from the jungle, and in that, it's a highly gang infested area and lots of problems, and over the weekend, certainly my staff could easily be picked up for meeting the profile. And so I think that this kind of a process makes sense to assist those to petition out who are not involved, not subject to that activity. I support it, and I'll move the bill.
Senator Calderon.
Yes, just a couple of questions. The petition itself, Senator Wright, the petition can be filed by the person themselves, or it has to be by legal counsel?
It actually is designed to be filed by the individual himself.
By the individual?
Yeah. Or counsel.
Either way, yeah. But in the case the individual is filing, he's checking the boxes himself or indicating reasons why they should be relieved. And that's submitted to the court where they were tried, or the courthouse in their jurisdiction.
Yes. So, and remember, Senator Calderon, that for the most part, the people who are placed on an injunction list did not have access to an attorney. This is done in civil court. It's not done beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's a preponderance of evidence, and they have no right to many of the things. So even the issues of evidence that Mr. Vanekar describes, there is typically no cross-examination or proof. So you kind of sort of have a court that you go into, and you're relying on, again, and some of the things that are described are activities that the individual may or may not have done. He's not being charged with a crime. He's not being charged. It's not quite a kangaroo. I wouldn't go that far. But you're talking about individuals who are being charged with, in effect, associating with somebody who may have done something, or they may have done something. If there was a charge that could be made against the individual, you'd have charged him with a crime. Here I'm saying is that if that person has committed crimes, we'll know that, because the rap sheet will indicate that he's violated his injunction. That person wouldn't get off. It's worked well in Ventura, and again, if the person violates his injunction, it'll happen here. But if I could take a moment, Madam Chair, and I know you've got a special order, but I want to remind people that we don't want law enforcement to become so reactionary. Let me tell you another story about Los Angeles. We have an area that was called Rampart. The Los Angeles Police Department in Rampart launched on a massive gang suppression effort. What they did, Madam Chair, was the Rampart Division was committing crimes. Several hundred people were released from prison because the LAPD actually committed crimes. There are 4 or 5 police officers in jail whose job it was to suppress crime. When that was going on, we all applauded because, you know what, they were successful. And we never bothered to look at the fact that they were committing crimes almost as egregious as the people that they were attacking. The city of Los Angeles is still, Madam Chair, on a federal consent decree as a result of the last time we tried to do this. I submit to you that this bill does not remove the tool that's available for a gang injunction. The bill does not place an automatic eviction date. It doesn't vacate the order that was set forth by Mr. Vanekar. All this bill says is that you would have a form that indicates how you get off in the event you've complied with the order over a period of time. Yes, it's done in Ventura. The city of Los Angeles reluctantly started doing it after Mr. Vanekar left. So now what we're talking about is a mechanism that provides in advance a way for this guy to go. If he's still gangbanging and committing crimes, then he doesn't get the benefit of this system. And I'd ask for your aye vote, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Wright. And
Senator, I'm sorry.
That probably was your close.
Okay.
But nevertheless, Senator Harman has a question.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. The first one deals with this is a civil action. You have a new party coming into the civil action to request that the injunction be terminated. Is there a filing fee that has to be paid by the individual, which is the normal practice? An appearance fee has to be paid by a civil litigant. Will that be required in this case, or is there some? I looked in the bill. I don't see any exemption.
No, and I was checking. Your point is a good one. Well, I'm sure if we're able to move forward in appropriations, we'll have to place a nominal filing fee. But the idea was to try to make the process as simple as possible. So I'm certain appropriations will require some filing fee. It does say at line 12, page 2, about that the process to be inexpensive, and that's what kind of caught my eye. And we can't make it free, and we'll probably have to work with the probes to come up with a fee that makes it cost neutral. I would think that should be in there. Then I wanted to ask the representative from the district attorney's office. You mentioned in your testimony that I forget the words you used. I think it was at the get-go, an individual could ask to be exempted from the requested restraining order. What is the current status or current method for an individual to be released from the provisions of the injunction? Is there some process? Senator Wright's trying to make it simple and quick and speedy, and I understand that with the use of this form, but is there any process to get removed?
Senator, it's the same process that would be required for any civil litigant who was named in this injunction. We have had individuals who were initially named make an appearance at the first court hearing. As a matter of fact, when we issued an injunction against the Roland 60s in Los Angeles, that first court appearance was attended by over 30 named individuals in that lawsuit who stated their reasons before the court about why they should not be included in the injunction. The court heard their testimony and in effect found it not credible, and the process moved along. I note that one of the issues that's involved here is that the petition, the supposedly amendment that the requirement that the petition be filed under penalty of perjury was going to be dropped. And interestingly enough, that the affidavits in support of the injunction that are required are all signed by police officers and other witnesses under penalty of perjury. So there's absolutely no sanction for an individual who then would fill out this petition, present it to the court, indicate that he had fully complied with all of the requirements therein, and subsequently during an evidentiary hearing that be found not to be true, and yet there's no sanction for that.
So are you saying that this petition is not filed by the petitioner under penalty of perjury?
It was my understanding from reading the analysis that amendment was going to be taken here to delete the requirement for the signing the petition under penalty of perjury.
Madam Chair, have we addressed that issue yet in the hearing?
We have not talked about the hearing. As I think you were here when I reiterated, Senator Harmon, the committee is continuing the ROCA policy. Yes. Perjury is a felony offense. It would increase overcrowding, and we'd have to hold the bill. So the thought was that Senator Wright had agreed, in the interest of ROCA, to remove the penalty of perjury. But, as we will point out, there is an evidentiary hearing, and law enforcement can come if they wish to and express a different point of view.
What about the petitioner himself or herself? Can they be required to testify under oath at a court hearing? Or is this all done by affidavit, but the affidavit is done without penalty of perjury?
Let's ask the author about that. And if it is not explicit in here, Senator Wright, I think that the committee staff would work with you, if that's the wish of the committee, to clarify what that proceeding would look like.
And I'd certainly be amenable to that. Again, the idea is certainly not to give someone a get-out-of-jail-free card. And if, for example, a person filed and the district attorney or the city attorney wanted to contest that, then this is not an automatic. There would be a contested procedure. I'm not an attorney, so how we structure that, contesting element. But again, some things would be obvious. If he'd been arrested and convicted of crime subsequently to that, or if there was evidence that he'd been involved in activity that was in violation of the injunction, or if he had violated the injunction and been arrested for, and again, and Madam Chair, I remind the committee, the actions for which you violate the injunction are not things that would necessarily be illegal. So if your injunction says you can't wear blue tennis shoes on Crenshaw, that would cause you to have violated the injunction, even though wearing blue shoes on Crenshaw is not a violation of law. It would violate the injunction. So that if the person had violated the injunction, that would be grounds for the petition to be denied. It's not an automatic process by which you get this.
Right. I would just reiterate that to the committee, that this relief from injunction is not a right. The burden of proof is on the petitioner, and there is an evidentiary hearing in which the evidence can be contested. I think this is part of a much larger issue of gangs and injunctions and whether or not they work and how they affect people's civil liberties. By coincidence, I spent last weekend in Los Angeles visiting projects that are run by Mayor Ragosa's gang intervention and prevention division, visiting programs and visiting camps.
I had a few more questions,
okay,
Madam Chair, if I could.
Yeah, don't.
Well, I'm really stuck on this issue about not signing under penalty of perjury. As the chair just pointed out, there's an evidentiary hearing, but evidentiary hearings, by their very definition, are evidence, testimony in open court where you're sworn a sworn witness, or affidavit signed under penalty of perjury. So let me just, trying to think of a hypothetical. I mean, a gang member could come in and lie and say, looking at section Roman numeral VI on page 34, page 3, which is the one about tattoos. Can't have any tattoos. He just says, I haven't had any tattoos gang tattoos the last 3 years. He's lying. And there's no penalty for him doing that. There's no way for law enforcement officials to find out. And if they do find out, he was down at the XYZ tattoo parlor and got a gang tattoo last week, so what? He just said he didn't do it, and if he didn't, well, there's no penalty for it, and there's no evidentiary hearing. Courts cannot, it's my understanding, courts cannot hear evidence unless it's a sworn affidavit or a live testimony in court. So it's almost like a free pass. And let me move on to another concern, and I'll address this to Senator Wright. Have you given any consideration to multiple filings by the same person? Let's say X goes down and files this week, and the judge turns him down, just goes back the next week, goes back the next week, goes back. It seems to me there should be some limitation on how often in a certain time frame an individual could file one of these applications, which, by the way, looks like it's going to be at either no filing fee or a reduced filing fee. So it's taking up court time, it's taking up judicial time. It's in the works. It's going to cost money.
Mr. Senator Harmon, what about every 3 years? Once every 3 years.
I think any reasonable number like that.
Okay. Madam,
it's your bill, Senator. You put the number in you want, but but I think there should be something. And then the final question, I apologize for taking so much time, is dealing with it says on page 3 that the petitioner may petition the court, and this is line 16, petition the court to exempt him or her from all or any part of an injunction order. the thought occurs to me that when that petition comes before the court may want to amend the injunction. They might release all or part of it, but I don't know that we shouldn't have something in there that would empower the court. Well, I'm going to let you off of and dissolve this part of the injunction, but I'm going to add a new one that you can't do this. And I think that kind of language should probably be in the bill to give the court jurisdiction to deal with any amending, because right now it simply says all the court can do is exempt him from all or part of the injunction, and I'm suggesting that the court may want to add some new feature that's not an amendment or an exemption from the existing injunction. And then finally, is there a provision for notice that the petition filed by the petitioner has to be served on the district attorney or the police department, or is there some kind of notice provision? I didn't see that in the bill, but it may be covered automatically by rules of court or procedure for all I know. Might want to check that out too. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I think that's what we said the committee staff could work with you on if there is no such procedure. Again, I would simply point out this is a blanket. Generally, I think gang injunctions are a blanket order. So would you add something for one person? But it would be something to look at that you wouldn't add for everybody else who lived in the area. What I was going to say
Well, he gave the illustration of, or one of the witnesses did, about 30 individuals had appeared and contested the injunction. So I think there are blanket injunctions, and I think there are individual injunctions that may apply to an individual. And that person, if they came to have their the injunction imposed on them changed or exempted using the language of the bill, it might be that the court would want to somehow amend it.
All right. Senator Wright has agreed to eliminate the ROCA problem, which is the penalty of perjury. He will work with the committee as the bill moves forward on matters of a possible fee and how the court would be notified in case law enforcement wanted to protest the lifting of the injunction for any particular individual. Is that correct?
Without objection, you want to take those amendments?
So without objection, we take
as well, Madam Chair,
those amendments.
A time frame of some.
Oh, and up to 3 years between petitions.
So work with the author to ensure that any affidavits filed with the court are done so properly.
And additionally, staff will work with the author to make sure that any affidavits filed with the court are filed properly, and that will be included in language as the bill moves forward to appropriation.
Thank you, Madam Chair and staff. I appreciate the assistance.
So there is a motion from as amended to appropriations. Madam Secretary, please read the roll.
Hancock?
Aye.
Hancock, aye. Anderson? Calderon?
Aye.
Calderon, aye. Harmon?
No.
Harmon, no. Liu?
Aye.
Liu, aye. Price?
Aye.
Price, aye. Steinberg?
That bill is on call.
And Senator Price has asked that we lift the calls on the items that came before he came in.
Fine. Okay, as we're getting ready for our 10:15 hearing, Senator Price has requested that we lift the call on the items we took up prior to his being able to join the committee. So, committee rules.
Aye.
Thank you.
To call you.
Well, everybody else I think has voted, so it's you.
Price?
And
Price, aye.
We'll put that back
okay.
on call.
SB 61, Pavley, wiretapping sunset extension.
Price, aye.
Aye.
Wait a second. You can call the vote on that one. What's the vote, Mona, on that one?
Oh, the vote, yeah,
The vote is 6-0. You can
6-0, right.
That bill is out.
That bill is out. SB 179, Pavley, tolling the parole period for sexually violent predators.
Price? Aye. Price, aye. 6-0.
Yeah. And item number 6, you just voted on. Right, the 2 Pavleys. Right, that's it.
And now we're waiting for Senator Padilla.
So we're waiting for Senator.
Agenda.
So we'll have the last item on the agenda.
Madam Chair, you have left the roll open for Senator Anderson, who is conflicted this morning with another. Thank you.
Yes.
Big question.
All right, the author and the time certain having arrived, we will hear our last item of the day, which is SB 26 by Senator Padilla, related to wireless communication devices. Senator Padilla.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I appreciate your patience. I was presenting in another committee up until a minute ago, and certainly appreciate the accommodation of this special order and SB 26. I wanted to start by giving the committee a little bit of background as to why I've been so involved with this issue for years. It was in the year 2006, the year that Senator Calderon and I were first running for Senate, that we learned that in Sao Paulo, Brazil, there was a prison gang that used cell phones to organize simultaneous riots in 73 prisons. And more ominously, the prisoners were directing street gangs in Sao Paulo to carry out coordinated attacks on Sao Paulo police officers in the streets. Prison inmates effectively shut down Brazil's financial capital for days. And it was later learned that the gang leaders at each of these Sao Paulo prisons had regular conference calls to coordinate these criminal activities. So I started asking our prison officials here in California if what happened in Sao Paulo could potentially happen here in California. And in fact, the CDCR confirmed that, like in Brazil, California inmates are using cell phones to communicate with other inmates in their own prisons, with inmates in other prisons, and the department has also confirmed that inmates are using phones to coordinate criminal activities in communities throughout the state of California. In 2006, the year that the Sao Paulo riots occurred, there were 261 cell phones confiscated in California prisons. Just last year, 2010, that number was nearly 11,000. It is a serious problem that is getting worse each and every year, not only in California, but throughout the country. So much so that last year, President Obama responded to the threat of inmates in federal prisons that have cell phones when he signed a ban on cell phones in federal prisons. And that measure, since this is a policy committee, federal law calls for up to a year of prison time for anyone caught smuggling a cell phone to a federal prisoner. Our California Senators Boxer and Feinstein were both supportive of the bill. In fact, Senator Feinstein was a co-sponsor of that bill. Since 2006, 43 states have taken action to tackle this problem in their state prisons. 43 states have passed some tough laws. For example, in the President's state of Illinois, if you bring in or possess a cell phone, it's considered a Class 1 felony, and you face anywhere between 4 and 15 years in prison. In Colorado, smugglers face 19 months in prison and a $100,000 fine. In Oregon, these aren't red states, folks. In Oregon, smugglers face 5 years in prison and a $125,000 fine. Inmates are punished with 120 days of disciplinary segregation, a fine, and loss of time credit. There's a consistency in these other 43 states, and their response, they're taking the problem seriously, and they're cracking down hard. Yet nowhere in the nation is the problem bigger than it is right here in the state of California. Yet, since 2006, we have failed to act. Last year, when I finally crafted a bill that the legislature could support, and we got it to the governor's desk, Governor Schwarzenegger vetoed that bill. I've been caught between a legislature that is very reluctant to create a new felony and the former governor who wouldn't sign a bill that was anything less than the creation of a new felony. I'm hopeful that this year will be different, among other reasons, because we have a new governor who previously served as Attorney General, and as Attorney General gained a unique appreciation and understanding of the problem and the threat that cell phones in the hands of dangerous inmates present. We also have assembled a strong coalition supporting a consensus solution. That coalition includes sheriffs, police officers, district attorneys, the California Correctional Peace Officers Association, the California Coalition Against Sexual Violence, the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence, Crime Victims United, and many others. The coalition is supportive of SB 26, and their numbers are growing. I wanted to also call attention to the committee's analysis that makes reference on page 9 to a 2008 Office of Inspector General report specific to the problem of cell phones in our prisons. Page 9 of your analysis. The very first recommendation from that Inspector General report is this, I'll quote, "Continue efforts to seek legislative change to make the introduction or possession of cell phones in all correctional facilities a criminal offense." The bill before you does just that. I believe that it is tough enough to make both smugglers and inmates think twice. This bill would make smuggling by anyone, a misdemeanor punishable by 6 months in jail and a $5,000 fine per device. This bill, for inmates caught in possession of a cell phone, they would face up to 6 months of permanent loss of time credit, and an inmate caught using the cell phone to facilitate a crime would face a sentence enhancement of 2 to 5 years. Now, some people will suggest that $5,000 is too much of a fine, and I couldn't disagree more. First, people that are selling these phones to inmates are selling them for more than $1,000 a piece. There has to be the fiscal disincentive, the fiscal deterrent for the smuggling of cell phones into our prisons. In fact, one person who was caught a couple of years ago bragged about making $100,000 in a single year by smuggling cell phones into inmates. There has to be a strong financial deterrent. Second, this is not a typical misdemeanor offense. Cell phones in prisons have been used to facilitate murder. Smugglers are effectively arming inmates by providing them cell phones. $5,000 is not excessive. There are plenty of lesser crimes that are punished with $5,000 fines. If you haul grease in the wrong type of vehicle in California, it's a $10,000 fine. If you barricade a street to facilitate a street race, it's a $5,000 fine. Other opponents will argue that 100 days time credit loss does not match the punishment for misdemeanors. I ask you to please keep in mind that smuggled cell phones are being used to facilitate murder and to intimidate witnesses and victims. Currently, there are many crimes by inmates that result in 180 days time loss credit, including the destruction of state property during a disturbance in prison. Possessing a cell phone is just as dangerous, if not more dangerous. Some opponents to the bill would argue that inmates mostly use these cell phones for harmless activities. I invite you to ask the department. They're in the best position to characterize how these phones are being used. Have them tell you the stories about rape victims being traumatized by phone calls, by text messages, and by images, and witness intimidation. These phones are being used to orchestrate real crimes, affecting real people. Some will no doubt argue that these penalties won't be a deterrent, that they're not strong enough. I'd be happy to entertain a stronger bill. Other people will say, well, let's not create these penalties for smuggling cell phones into prison or for inmates who are caught. There's other solutions, aren't there? Like metal detectors that screen everybody entering prisons, or use technology such as managed access to control what cell phones work and which cell phones don't work. This committee in the past made that same recommendation. And at the time, I took amendments to that effect, only to watch those bills die in Appropriations Committee because of the suspense process and the budget reality that our state is facing. In the meantime, we have again seen the number of cell phones caught on an annual basis go from a couple of hundred to more than 10,000 per year. So while I'm supportive of metal detectors and a screening process, while I'm supportive of technological solutions, they're part of a longer-term comprehensive strategy that should include SB 26 to not support the legislative proposals I have by suggesting we invest in newer technology that will take time to implement is allowing the status quo to continue. Let me close these remarks by addressing a very real issue and consideration for this committee known as ROCA. Under previous chairs, this committee established the receivership overcrowding aggravation policy that we refer to as ROCA. And the idea of ROCA was to oppose bills that would exacerbate the overcrowded situation in our prisons. I argue that continuing to allow cell phones to proliferate in our prisons is in and of itself a violation of ROCA. Cell phones have become crime multipliers. We don't just suspect, we know that cell phones are being used by inmates to commit crimes both inside and outside of prisons. Allowing inmates to organize criminal activity results in more crimes in our communities, which, to begin with, leads to more victims, but also leads to more arrests, more convictions, and ultimately more inmates in our prison system. If we succeed in stemming the flow of cell phones into our prisons, we are preventing crimes. We are preventing people from becoming victims, and we are preventing additional prisoners from entering into our prison system. This past September, when he was still Attorney General, Jared Brown announced the arrest of 4 prison gang leaders, and 30 prison gang members. Several of those arrested were allegedly given orders to commit murder and other violent crimes by imprisoned gang leaders who sent them messages via cell phones. Attorney General Brown then summed it up clearly, and I want to quote for the committee today. Quote, incarcerated inmates are supposed to be serving their time out of circulation, but because of the introduction of cell phones, these individuals in prisons are maintaining their role, their hierarchical position in their gangs. End quote. Members, allowing an inmate to maintain their criminal role while in prison leads to more crimes and more overcrowding. This bill does not increase overcrowding. It can help decrease overcrowding by helping to sever the ties between imprisoned gang leaders and the street gangs they control. I will accept the committee amendments suggested in the analysis to include language to protect visitors who unintentionally bring a cell phone into prison. I had previously agreed to that in last year's version of the bill. I also accept the amendments to consolidate the punishments for smugglers, employees, and non-employees into one paragraph so that all smugglers are punishable by the same time in jail and fine. And I'd like to be sure that in the amendments taken today, we make 3 minor amendments committee staff and my staff have discussed to add language to ensure any crimes in the bill do not preclude prosecution of other crimes, to remove the reference to research in motion, and to removing ward from the time credit loss as wards do not receive that time credit. Also would like to add Senators Harman, Fuller, Anderson, and Walters as co-authors to the bill. But I also want to clarify to the committee that I choose to not accept the reduction of time credit loss from the 180 days to the 90 days as suggested into the analysis. 180 days of lost time is a minimally appropriate punishment for the potential violence that is facilitated by inmates with a cell phone. With that, I want to introduce some witnesses I have with me today. Terry McDonald from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, as well as Nancy O'Malley, the District Attorney of Alameda County. They will share with you their perspectives on the danger that cell phones in our prisons are presenting to public safety.
Good morning, Senators and staff, Madam Chair, and thank you to Senator Padilla for your leadership. I'm Terry McDonald, Chief Deputy Secretary for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, and in my role, I'm responsible for adult prisons and adult parole in the state of California. I cannot more eloquently or artfully report to you the problem of cell phones in our prisons, and not just in our prisons, but in our community, because it is not an exaggeration to say that an offender's access to a cell phone in prison blurs the line between street crime and prison crime. The reality of it is, and I think any law enforcement agent in the state of California will tell you, that crimes are led from prison gang members in prisons onto the streets of California, and vice versa. We have a variety of ways that we try to control crime in our prisons and reduce the amount of the way that crime bleeds into the community. And one of those ways that we use is the use of monitored telephones. Offenders currently can use the phone to call their families, their friends, their loved ones, but those phones are monitored by staff and they're recorded. So in the event that we believe criminal behavior is occurring, we can go and use that tool for investigative purposes. Offenders have now beat that system by the use of cell phones, and not simple cell phones, but complex cell phones that have access to the internet, GPS systems, the ability to terrorize victims in the community, the ability to call for murders in the community, the ability actually to call each other on yards and let them know that we're coming in to do searches. So, for example, we may want to do a mass search sweep to look for cell phones on a yard, and they start calling the other yards and say, get rid of your cell phones, so we can't find them. We had an incident on Saturday, what we call rolling riots at the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo, where a riot started on one yard and erupted on 3 yards, all within several hours. I don't have the report yet, but I would bet my professional reputation that cell phones were involved in noticing inmates of the riot yard to yard to yard. That happens prison to prison to prison. It happens prisons to communities. I represent tens of thousands of peace officers that protect this state, and they're asking for a multi-pronged approach towards dealing with cell phones in our prisons. And one of those pronged approaches is a serious and legitimate consequence for that behavior, whether it's an employee that brings a cell phone into offenders, or a visitor, or a contractor, or an inmate himself or herself that has a cell phone. Currently, the only consequence for an offender is a 30-day loss of behavior credit, and that 30 days is restorable. So, in effect, there is no consequence for it. Same with employees or visitors. There's no crime associated with it. And so, with no consequence, the behavior grows. The senator described that we had 300 cell phones 4 years ago, almost 11,000 last year. That's an enormous growth, and California is not unique. This isn't a problem unique only to us. It's in the jails, it's in federal prisons, state prisons nationally, and we need help and support to deal with that. I'll tell you that in 2010, we had 1,000 more incidents of violence in our prisons than any year previous. We have fewer inmates in our state prison in 2010 than in the year previous. And I believe that part of those incidents are driven by inmates' abilities to have access to cell phones. And Mississippi was able to, they put in a managed access system in the state there, and they found by putting in the managed access system, they reduced their incidents in prison by over 50%.
Could you say what that is, please?
Oh, forgive me. Managed access is a technology solution that doesn't enable everybody to call out. The type of crimes that are being committed, I would say 100% of our recent escapes out of fire camps and our minimum support settings are associated with a cell phone. We find that the offender had a cell phone, was able to call their family members and say, or their friends and say, come get me. They also have GPS systems, so they have maps. So they're in the middle of the forest, and they're able to tell their visitors or the people that are going to come get them where they are. Had they not had those cell phones, then they wouldn't have affected that escape. The South Carolina had an incident in the use of a cell phone by a Captain Johnson. Captain Johnson was a gang investigator and a detection investigator for the state of California Department of Corrections, and he was doing an incredible job of catching cell phones and drugs. And what happened was one of the gang leaders in the prisons didn't appreciate his activities and ordered his murder from his cell phone in prison. So that offender called or texted another gang member in the community. That gang member broke into Captain Johnson's home while he was getting ready for work, and his wife laid in bed, shot him 6 times in the stomach. I can tell you that I don't want to be in a position where that occurs to one of my staff members, and I know this governing body doesn't as well. This is a serious, serious issue for the state of California. It's as serious as drugs, identity theft, child pornography. Every crime that you can think of is being propagated by cell phones in our system, and we ask for your support and guidance and leadership in addressing that. I'm available for any questions that you may have of me.
I will have a question. I don't know if we want to continue. Maybe I'll ask the question now. I want to, first of all, commend Senator Padilla for his persistence and for keeping on this extremely, extremely important topic. And I think that he has a good bill, and that I hope, believe we'll be able to move it forward. One of the most disturbing things for me, however, that the bill does not address is the breach of trust involved when guns are smuggled in by prison guards or by prison staff. And I'm glad that the bill includes in the misdemeanor offenses both guards and staff. But I would note that last year, according to the statistics my office was given by CDCR, there were 9,000, I believe, 624 cell phones confiscated. There were only 200 people up for any disciplinary action at all, and of those 200 people, only 8 people were terminated from their position. I had wondered why, and if the department would support in the future, asking the director of CDCR to seek termination of anyone employed by our correction system who takes guns in to sell to inmates, thereby jeopardizing everyone else, their colleagues working in the prison, and everyone else. To me, this is not only a very egregious offense, but a breach of public trust that is quite extraordinary. I wondered...
Senator, we certainly share your concern about any employee who would bring in any type of contraband, and guns particularly.
No, cell phones. These are cell phones that were confiscated.
You were saying guns.
You
mentioned
yourself and
guns.
said guns, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's the same thing, Senator Armand, but thank you. No, I'm sorry. I meant specifically cell phones, which was the subject, of this bill.
Thank you. I apologize. We take any introduction of any contraband by employees, whether it's tobacco, cell phones, weapons, alcohol, very seriously.
Let's just deal with cell phones. Cell phones, which are used to commit other crimes, as you just delineated.
Sure. If an employee is alleged to have brought in cell phones to offenders, it is a violation of public trust. It's a violation of our expectations, and those are not people that we want employed for us. So we immediately divert them away from any access to offenders. It may be that they're on administrative time off or they're placed in a non-contact area with inmates, but we take it very seriously. In our disciplinary matrix, giving dangerous contraband to offenders is considered a terminable offense. And so that is the general expectation that they be terminated.
Only 8 were.
The actual actions that are finally taken are complex, and they're driven not just by departmental regulations, but by the State Personnel Board and other government code realities. So we do not want employees working for us who are smuggling contraband into offenders, and the expectation is they're terminated. But again, Senator, there are some complex realities for each individual offense, and I'm not familiar with the 192 that weren't terminated, but they could have resigned, they could have found another employment, there could have been a variety of things that they did as we began the investigatory and disciplinary process.
Well, I hope that we will look at that in the future, because if these cell phones are being brought in primarily, it appears, by people employed by our correction system. And in addition, and this bill is a great step forward because it does specify a misdemeanor offense, and I'm assuming and hoping that a person convicted of a misdemeanor is not entitled to continue working in our correction system. But it's something that I think we need to look at in the future and recognize what a real problem it is. I did discuss this with the author, and he said he'd be interested in working on it as we move forward, and I hope CDCR would as well.
Senator, if I could, I would be remiss in not the concept that cell phones are brought primarily in by staff, I don't know is supported necessarily by the facts. I will say that staff have been engaged and will continue to be engaged in bringing in contraband. Some staff do get compromised, but there are many, many ways that offenders bring cell phones in. They come in boxes, in trucks, in mass, like boxes like this, hidden in other items. So employees are an issue, but there's other ways that they're being introduced into our system.
I'm sure there are. We've heard the stories of the soccer balls thrown over the fence. Nevertheless, we are talking with very large numbers, and I think we need to work on this problem from all directions. But
good morning, Senator and committee. I am very happy to be here. I'm Nancy O'Malley, the District Attorney from Alameda County, and I'm also here on behalf of the California District Attorneys Association. My involvement with this bill and the basis for it is much closer to home. In 1996, I tried a case that involved a very brutal gang rape of a 15-year-old girl by 4 men. And she still has permanent damage and trauma from what happened to her when she was seriously assaulted. That was in 1996, and the ringleader of this gang was sentenced to 90 years in prison. That will just tell you how extensive the crimes were against this little girl. She was fearful, as you can imagine, to come to court, but she did. She set aside her fears, came in, testified, being cross-examined by four defense attorneys, but told what happened to her. In 2008, I received a phone call on December 27, and it was this young woman screaming hysterically on the phone to me that she had just received a phone call from the ringleader, and that he talked to her about all the things that they did to her that night, that he told her they were coming back to see her, and that they knew that she had a child, and they gave her personal information. Of course, what happened to her was she passed out. She fainted from fear, and someone was there, and then once they figured out what was going on, called me. My first question is, how is this guy out of prison when he was sentenced to so many years? And what we found out through our investigation was that he was using a cell phone. He had it for 24 hours. He paid $1,000. His people paid it to the person in prison, that guy's people. And that same cell phone was just being passed around, so you would rent it for about 24 hours. We also, in our investigation, were able to interview some of the inmates who actually are in the business of moving cell phones around, who gave us some very enlightening information about it. And imagine our horror that we found out that there was nothing we could do about it, other than to try to comfort this young woman and assure her that these men were not going to come and see her. But the problem is, what we found out is that they found out where she was. She's since married and has, as I said, a child. They found out where she was through doing Google searches. We also found out that there were judges' home addresses that were in cells for people who got them through Google searches. We also, after we advertised this issue and really beefed up our identity theft division prosecution, I got a call from a couple from Fresno who said that they were the victims of identity theft, and what they received was a phone bill for $20,000 that was used over the course of 2 days in the prison, and that $20,000 was what was rung up on that bill, no pun intended. They had a nephew who had a friend who was in prison, and they suspect that that's how it all came together. But again, there was nothing that could happen or could be done about that. I see victims all the time. We just, in the last year, prosecuted a very serious gang case that occurred in Berkeley and Oakland area. And what we found out through that prosecution was that the gang leader, who was himself in prison, was directing the gang activity that was plaguing West Oakland and North Berkeley. So the cell phone use in prison is, as we all know and is documented, very extensive. The outcome to the community, the safety to all of us, and particularly the safety to victims is just horrendous. And so I urge that this bill move forward. And I know, I speak on behalf of the California District Attorney's Office to also urge you to pass this bill out. Thank you.
Are there other witnesses in support?
Philip Ong on behalf of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We represent the 63 rape crisis centers and the rape crisis advocates that serve the victims of sexual assault, and this is a very important bill for us. We can't imagine what a survivor goes through when they go through all of the trauma and then start to repair their lives and then to receive a phone call from that offender. It's incredibly traumatizing, and we applaud Senator Padilla for his leadership on this and the rest of the co-authors, and we urge this committee to vote aye. Thank you.
Craig Brown for the California Correctional Peace Officers Association, and we're in support of this bill. Our members who intentionally bring phones in ought to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, and the disciplinary process ought to deal with the other issues. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members, Paul Curry on behalf of the Correctional Supervisors Organization, and we also are in strong support, and we believe that this will be a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members, Steve Carlson for CTIA, the Wireless Association, the international association representing the cell phone industry. We're in strong support. This is a major part of an approach to dealing with cell phones in prisons. We need the legislative and criminal aspect as well as the technological aspect that Deputy Director McDonald indicated on managed access, and with those two things, I think we can really take a bite out of this. So thank you very much for your support.
Thank you. Dawn Kapke with McEwen Associates on behalf of Crime Victims United of California, also in strong support. We support the ability to help eliminate the offenders' opportunities to continue to victimize victims out in the community. Thank you.
Good morning, Lieutenant Barbara Ferguson, representing San Bernardino County Sheriff Rod Hoops. We're in support of this bill because this is also coming down, overflowing into the county jails. Thank you.
I support the bill, because of my father's, this is Larry Carusos. I'm Stephanie Carusos. I'm his daughter, and this is my mother. Just make sure that this law will pass because of the sake of what happened to my father, and we're victims, so just.
Yes, I'm Karen Carusosa. I lost my husband to murder, and I want to support this also because it's been 11 years since my husband passed away, and here all of a sudden on the news we see that this guy that killed my husband had got a hold of a cell phone and was on Facebook texting to his family, and he was he put his nickname on there, but it was him, and we've seen this on the news, and it just opened the wound and just really kind of traumatized me and my family, and so it's real important, because it does put out a threat and makes us wonder, well, how come he's enjoying life in there like that? How did he get a hold of the phone and get on Facebook? So I'm supporting it, me and my family. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, Steve Moore, San Joaquin County Sheriff, representing California State Sheriff's Association, who are much in support of this bill, and especially in San Joaquin County, where we're home to several of our colleagues' facilities and probably additional facilities in the future. And we see that this type of legislation will be greatly helpful, not only for Department of Corrections, but the influence within San Joaquin County, as we have additional people that live and work there, that work in their system, and that are victimized by other crimes. Thank you.
Pratima Pandey from the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. We represent 150 domestic violence agencies and individuals working throughout the state of California to end domestic violence, and we strongly support this bill. It would end victim intimidation, harassment, and threat. Putting somebody away in jail should allow a victim of domestic violence to continue and end the cycle of violence. Living in fear of being intimidated from within the prison does not allow a victim to move forward and end the cycle of abuse. We support this bill, and we urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Pete Hernandez with AT&T, and I'm here to express our strong support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Others in support? Are there witnesses in opposition? Well, then there'll be questions.
Thank you to the chair and members. Jim Lindberg on behalf of the Friends Committee on Legislation of California. We do have an opposed unless amended position, and it centers on the confiscation issue and visitors who are inadvertently found with a cell phone in their possession, and also the dual language concerning penalties. It sounds like the amendments being offered by the committee would address those concerns, though we haven't seen the language, but I would like to thank the author for taking those amendments. Aside from that, we think that the penalty enhancement for a prisoner convicted of a felony using a cell phone is unlikely to have any deterrent effect if the penalties for the underlying crime did not deter the prisoner. And then lastly, just an editorial comment. We think that the bill begs the question about employees and vendors who are known to be bringing cell phones into prisons. They are not required to undergo any kind of security screening such as visitors are. Visitors are required to walk through metal detectors that are so sensitive that women cannot wear underwire bras. If metal detectors are unfeasible because of the state's fiscal problems, then we think the approach by Senator Oropeza's legislation last year, which would require random, periodic, unannounced screenings of employees, is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other witnesses in opposition? Are there questions or comments? Senator Harman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Padilla, for bringing this bill forward, and I'm honored to be a co-author of the bill. Having said that, and I'm certain you share these concerns that I have, that this, as far as the penalty phase, to me, simply doesn't go far enough. It needs to be stricter, and it is running afoul of the ROCA process that this committee has been following for the last couple of years. I mean, this cries out for some type of felony conviction to stop what's going on in our prisons, and slapping someone on the wrist with a misdemeanor with a very minor penalty attached to it simply makes no sense to me. And I would ask you, Madam Chair, in your discussions with the President Pro Tem of the Senate, are there any exceptions? Are there any times when there can be, and this just seems to cry out for an exception to the ROCA policy. I understand the policy. I can live with it. I don't like it, but I can live with it. But this just seems that this rule is so strict and so fixed that we need to have some kind of an exemption process. Now, the last bill that we heard, Senator Wright's bill, ran into the same problem, where a petitioner can file for an exemption from a gang injunction and can simply lie on their application because it's not signed under penalty of perjury, because you can't put the penalty of perjury in because it becomes a felony and runs afoul of ROCA. So I would strongly urge you to discuss this with the Pro Tem and see if there isn't some process like this where lives are in danger, victims are being traumatized, murders are being arranged, and there's hardly any penalty for it. It just doesn't seem right to me.
Senator Harman, I appreciate what you're saying. There was only one time in the last 3 years that I can remember that ROCA was not done, and that was because there was a sentence decrease that was estimated to lead to an equal amount of people not going to prison. That might be something, as the bill moves forward, the author might want to look at. But I would just point out, the U.S. Supreme Court right now is looking at whether or not to demand that we release some thousands of prisoners because of the receivership and because our prison population has increased 300% in the last 25 years. So in light of that, I strongly support the ROCA provisions, and I would really invite all of us to work together, possibly in a committee bill, afterwards, to make sure that we cut off this smuggling where it's starting, which appears to be with staff of our correction system. So let's, I think there are many things we can look at as the bill moves forward. But right now, actually, I think the amendments taken by the author are important. And we also talked about removing the sentence enhancement, which again would violate ROCA, because if obviously a prisoner is convicted of an additional crime or intent to commit a crime as a result of a cell phone, they will be given additional prison time, and that's as it should be.
Well, I I can only say that I perhaps disagree with some of your comments, and I would encourage you to consider making some kind of a process available for legislators to fall within some type of an exception to ROCA. This bill cries out for that, and I hate to see our hands tied and we're unable to do anything at all when a situation as egregious as this one comes before us. So with those thoughts in mind, I will be reluctantly voting yes for this bill, but only because it's the right thing to do and a very small step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Anderson, did you have something you want to say?
Well, as I read through the bill, Senator Padilla, maybe you could address this again, but I believe the bill does cover employees smuggling. I think they're treated equally as any other smuggler. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then, sometimes we just have to take baby steps. And while I'd like to see the penalties increased, because I think that these crimes, I agree with your assessment and your argument that this facilitates many more crimes, and I don't believe a person has a chance at turning their life around as long as they're connected to those gangs and to those criminal elements. Having said that, if this doesn't work, I hope that you come back next year with stronger punishments, and we'll just keep dialing it in until we get it right. But hopefully this solves the problem, and I'm proud to be a co-author. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Liu.
Madam Chair, I just, it seems to be a very important issue with CDRC, and I think that the committee would be appreciative if we had a hearing on this, a hearing just on this issue about how we stop this kind of behavior in our prison system and look at it with Senator Padilla's bill as being part of the solution. Maybe former Senator Opeza's bill would be another part of it. Just take a more comprehensive look at how we help CDRC manage this problem or get rid of the problem.
I think that's an excellent idea. And I think Senator Padilla has raised also the whole issue of gangs in prison and out in the community as well. And what are the approaches that indicate success in resolving these problems, and most particularly within our prison system. And I think it's also connected with a variety of other things within CDCR that we ought to look at. So yes, that's a good suggestion. We will have a hearing on those topics, and I look forward to working with Senator Padilla on that. Now, I need to have a motion on the bill, and I would point out that Senator Padilla has agreed previously to two of the amendments, because actually there would not have been a misdemeanor. You want to move the bill?
I move the bill as the author has accepted the amendments.
Yeah, and then but I have to be clear that in order to make sure that we do not violate ROCA, that includes the felony enhancement part of striking that in addition to the other amendments.
Without objection.
If I can just respond to that. I know we spoke in your office yesterday evening about this. In my heart of hearts, I'd rather not take that amendment. I think you heard from District Attorney Miller a very unique case that unfortunately is not by any means the only time where an inmate is harassing a former victim, whether it's of domestic violence or sexual assault, etc. That harassment in and of itself, while maybe potentially prosecuted, convicted in a court of law, and therefore an additional crime with additional sentence, very rarely done and hard to do. And so aside from the 6 months loss of good time credit, not enough consequences, in my opinion, for inmates who don't just have the use of the phone, and there's a penalty for that, but use of the phone for purpose of committing another crime. I have not been a member of this committee, so I don't know, short of taking that element out of the bill, what happens to it vis-a-vis ROCA if that's held in this committee versus if there's an opportunity for the members of the committee to vote on whether or not that amendment is taken or not. But I just want to go on the record of not preferring to not take that amendment, but this committee will do.
Madam Chair?
Wait, if you don't want to take the amendment, I will hold the bill in committee. It can come up, if you wish, for a vote at a future hearing. If you will take the amendment, I hope we will move it out today, and we...
I will accept the committee's wishes as it pertains to that amendment.
Madam Chair, is it possible for us to go ahead and have a vote?
No.
Without the amendment, and then if it doesn't pass, take reconsideration and perhaps do the vote with the amendment?
No, it's not.
Because I'd like to vote on it today.
Okay. So the question is, do you want to go ahead and have a vote today, or shall I just hold the bill?
I'd like to vote.
Okay.
So first, amendments without objection.
So we have 3 authors' amendments. And so is there a motion for the bill as amended to move to appropriations?
Madam Chair, I apologize for my absence. Could you just restate those amendments, please?
Yes. The amendments give equal punishment for either having a cell phone or smuggling in a cell phone. The bill as previously written did not have time in jail for employees smuggling in cell phones, but now both employees and inmates who have a cell phone would have a misdemeanor punishable up to 6 months in jail and $5,000 fine per device. And visitors' phones that where it is determined that there was no intent to smuggle in the phone would be returned to them, and the sentence enhancement that's included if an inmate is found guilty of another crime which they would serve in addition to their sentence is removed. And staff could clarify that if you want, and staff will work with the author on the amendments.
Yeah, just to clarify the amendments. Anyone, staff or non-staff, who is found to have possessed a cell phone with intent to deliver to an inmate would be guilty of a misdemeanor punishable by 6 months in jail, a fine of $5,000 per device, or both. Visitors would be subject to a visitor going through a metal detector found to have a cell phone on their possession would be subject to having the phone confiscated while it is investigated whether they had an intent to pass it to an inmate. If it is determined that they do not have an intent to pass it to an inmate, they would be entitled to get their phone back at their own expense. Inmates who are found in possession of a cell phone would be subject to losing up to 6 months of good time credit, which they could not earn back. The other amendments that you mentioned would be the technical amendments, removing the brand name, authorizing, and the additional co-authors, and the felony enhancement would be stricken.
Okay.
And there was a motion on the bill as amended?
Is there a motion on the bill as amended to appropriations?
A final question, I believe.
We have a lot of experts here, and I'm a little confused. So, and maybe somebody can answer this for me. So, if I'm an inmate and I order a gang killing of another prisoner, do I get an extension on my time on my parole? Because I'm a little confused why it'd be okay to give them an extension for ordering a death inside the prison, but it's not okay to give them an extension if they ordered the death outside the prison.
I think the distinction here is if an inmate is found to have utilized his cell phone to order murder or any other criminal activity, for example, they can still be prosecuted and convicted for that additional crime. So in that sense, yes, there's more time to be served or what have you. But I think what the chair desires to do by deleting these enhancements in the original version of the bill is to not do both an additional 2, 3, or 5 years for utilizing the cell phone to commit that crime and the additional time for the crime itself.
Madam Chair, I had one brief question for the representative from the department. What is the process when a visitor has to go through the metal detector? Are there signs saying you've got to leave your cell phone and your car keys or something like that? I'm wondering, someone just inadvertently walks through the metal detector and boom, they lose their cell phone. Is there some process where they're required to check it first and then go through the metal detector?
Visitors, we have visitor handbooks and visitor guidelines that advise visitors what they're allowed to bring in and not bring in. I think the concern was that we would take a robust action against a visitor who inadvertently left their cell phone in their purse.
Yeah, that's my understanding too, but I just didn't know what the screening process is when they, is the first time they find out, gee, I can't bring a cell phone in when they walk through the metal detector? It is.
No, so there's signage inside as you enter prison grounds about what's felony, what's permitted, what's not permitted, who's allowed to come on, who's not, and then there's further signage inside the visiting rooms, complex areas, so folks know what's allowed.
Okay, good, thanks.
Senator, if I could also add, and I apologize if I didn't mention this earlier, but the amendments that the author agreed to take were the same as last year's, which did include a requirement that there would be signage saying cell phones are not allowed.
Okay. So the bill has been moved as amended to appropriations. Madam Secretary, would you read the roll?
Hancock.
Aye.
Hancock, aye. Anderson.
Aye.
Anderson, aye. Calderon. Harmon.
Aye.
Harmon, aye. Lou.
Aye.
Lou, aye. Price.
Aye.
Price, aye. Steinberg.
Put that on call for Senator Calderon to get there.
5-0.
The bill will be on call so that absent members may vote. But the bill did pass. And I can lift the calls for Senator Anderson on the committee rules.
Wait, we have to have the secretary.
Oh, the secretary has to read. See, we're both doing this. We're trying to get you back to GO.
Adoption of committee rules. Anderson.
Aye.
Anderson, aye.
And then the next item for Senator Anderson is item 6.
And then item 6 on gang injunctions.
Senator Anderson?
I'm going to come closer.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm having a hard time hearing.
Senators, gang injunctions, chair voting aye.
And which?
Senate Bill 296.
296.
It's agenda item
No.
6.
Okay, wait, she has to call.
Okay, Anderson.
No.
Anderson, no.
Okay.
And you can call the vote on that, Senator Hancock.
Okay,
That would be
that's
4-2. Bill is out.
So SB 296 is out 4-2.
And just did something, so I think you're all set, Senator.
Why, we didn't do anything else?
No. We're done.
Oh, you have it all?
On the PowerPoint.
Thank you so much.
Would you, committee rules?
The adoption of the committee rules.
Oh, item 2 then.
Aye.
And you were aye on the,
Padilla,
on Padilla, you're aye.
Item 1.
Okay.
And then SB 26, item 1, Calderon.
Aye.
Aye. Calderon, aye.
Okay.
6-0.
And that bill
And then
is out.
296 also? Yeah. Okay.
And we are adjourned.
Okay, the committee meeting is adjourned.